Okay, here we are again. Haunt Your Webpage 3, final haunting. This time we're going to be using JavaScript to do some things on our web page. I'm going to put in two functions. One of them is going to do those blood red words you see on the screen there. We're just going to choose words and on the fly pick them out in red and in a different font. And my other one is this mess with the text thing that you can see happening on screen. And then we're going to randomise everything at the end. So, start off with, if we're going to put some different fonts in, we need to pick some different fonts. Google Fonts is not great for interesting looking fonts. It's got a lot of good standard plain things, but I've gone onto this site, DA Font, to look for some 100% free fonts that look a bit spooky. So I'm just going to choose a couple. I kind of like that Cold Night for Alligators one and see what it looks like. And then the Gypsy Curse one is not bad either. That looks like a good horror font. So having chosen those two, we use these in a slightly different way from the Google fonts. We have to actually save them on our computer. In that subdirectory, which is just underneath the HTML file, we're going to save them. .ttf file, true type font, means it's compatible with basically everything on the web. And that's good. We're just looking at the info for this particular font. He's fine with you using it anywhere you like. Thinks it's only really good for headings, so we'll see. I'm going to use it in a slightly different way, but if it doesn't work out, we're kind of ready for that. So we'll just start off with just some plain old CSS, not going to get into the JavaScript stuff just yet until we've set our stuff up. Start off with a font face declaration. So define what the name of our font is, can be anything you like, so long as it's meaningful to you, and where to find it. So where to find it, because I've saved it in a subdirectory that's just in the same place as my main HTML file. So that's the name of the subdirectory, fonts, and coldnightforalligators.ttf is the name of the file with the font in there. So that is now usable by our web page, that particular font face. I'm going to put in another one for the second font that I downloaded, the Gypsy Curse one. And in this particular case, so again, just any old name, something that's a bit like the name of the font is obviously good, because then you'll remember. When you're putting in the URL this time, thing to remember is the Gypsy Curse font had a space in it. Got to be careful with spaces. Always put quote marks around them, otherwise you can get into all sorts of trouble and weird stuff happens. We don't like weird stuff. We're going to stop it happening. So those are there now, and what will I do next? Well, more plain old ordinary CSS. Let's just use them a bit and see what they look like. So I think I'm going to define all the headings and emphasized text, the EM tag. They're all going to use one of these fonts. I'll see which one of them looks better. So those tags separated by commas means that for any of these tags, the style will apply, which is having the font family be one of my new font families that I just put in. So we'll start off with alligators. We'll see what it looks like. And at the moment, I've actually got an emphasised word in the first paragraph, and I've got the heading. So both of those are going to come out in the alligators font. And guess what? It looks like a pile of rubbish. I don't like that at all. That is really messy. No one's going to be able to read that. So, yeah, I've just taken away the emphasised tag in here, so we're just looking at the heading. Let's get rid of that and look at the other font that I just downloaded, the Gypsy Curse font. That looks a lot better. That's actually readable, and it's got a little bit of that sort of long, thin, spooky aspect to it. You can imagine it dripping blood. I think I'm going to turn it into my nice blood red colour, so, oh, and put it in the middle as well. So I think good sort of colour to make it fairly red, not blindingly, blaringly traffic light red, but considering that 255 is the highest that the red value can be, 150 is going to be fairly bright, but hopefully not completely over the top. Let's have a look at it. It is not too bad. I don't mind that. That's okay. A bit small. I think I'll tell it to just make the heading the largest heading, H1, be bigger without necessarily touching any of the others. So let's just make that a bit bigger and have a look at how that looks, and then after that we'll get into a bit of JavaScript maybe. That looks not bad. Okay, so we're going to put the JavaScript in a file of its own, like we put the CSS in a file of its own, and later on tell the HTML how to use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these longer words and I'm going to put them also into that font, that red, possibly dripping blood looking font that you can see up the top there. So we'll start off by defining a function. By the way, I'm going to assume that you've done a bit of programming. So you know what a function is, a variable is, this, that and the other, what a for loop, if clause, those sorts of general things that are usually in different programming languages. JavaScript is a moderately simple language. So we're doing a variable declaration there. There's a variable which we're going to call para for paragraph. And when you're using JavaScript in a web page, you can assume that this object document exists. The document is an object that contains everything that is on that HTML page. All the elements, all the HTML tags are in there, and we're going to use this function on the document object, which is called getElementById. So where there is an element that has an ID tag, that function will get it and put it in a variable. We don't have to tell the variable what sort of type it is, it will just figure it out on the fly. And we'll just do a little very, very crude simple debug here. We'll just pop up an alert box just so that we can see this very first time that the function actually ran, and then we'll go off and do some more complicated things later. So first of all, if we're going to look for an ID tag, we better actually put an ID tag there. So this paragraph, this third paragraph, will be the one that we'll work on, and we'll call it emphasize words, which is the same as the one we're finding in this function here. So complete list of all sorts of objects and what their methods and data are can be found at W3 Schools, my favourite webpage. And so up the top here, we're going to tell it to run this function, one word emphasis, on load, which means when the web page first comes up in your browser. And the last thing that we have to do is we have to actually tell the HTML page where to go looking for JavaScript functions. And so the source, it's just in the same directory as the main HTML page. So we just have to tell it that the file name is haunt.js, remembering to put a /script tag at the end, script tag at the beginning, /script at the end. If you don't close it off, then it won't do anything at all. And here we go. The function ran, it made an alert box. The alert box had the text we told it to have in it. That's all very gratifying. So let's keep going. What should we do next? We're going to make up another variable. So para variable will have the object, which is that paragraph element. If we want to get the actual text that you see on screen, that's this data in the object called inner HTML. That'll give you a string. Lots of JavaScript is done with strings, and strings have got a lot of very useful functions on them. One of them is this function called split. Split takes the string, figures out what character to use to split it up with, in this case a space, and then it goes through and turns the whole thing into an array of words. So I'm defining a word as anything that is split up by spaces before and after. So, and we can just do our very crude debugging check. We'll do a better debugging method later on, but first of all we'll just do a simple one to start off with, and we'll see the results of this function split text. So the alert box is just going to pop up the very first word that was put into the array, which is the, and we should go down to the third paragraph and see that in fact that is the first word. So this split text function is working okay to split up all of the words in that paragraph. And the reason why we're going to split up the words is because then I want to pick some to put EM emphasized tags around, and then I'm going to shove the text back into the paragraph again. Here's another very useful function for dealing with arrays, for each. So what that does is it runs a function on every element of the array. And so saying that we're going to run this function, we better go off and actually make the function to run. I said it was going to be called add word emphasis. So these variables are just the standard ones that you need to put in. You don't actually have to put in all three, you could just do the first one. But if you're going to have a function that is being used by this other function for each. So item is the item you're currently working on, which will end up being all the ones in the array. Index is the index that it's in the array of, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And ARR is the name of the array itself. So what I'm saying here is for every element of the array, I need to do some little editing there. I'm going to put in an EM element, and then whatever was in the array before, and then a /EM at the end. So we will have a look at this once I've written it all out, and you'll actually see what the results of it are. Okay, so that will pop all of the words inside this EM/EM set of tags, and then after we have done this add word emphasis on every element of the array, the next thing to do is use another JavaScript function called join to take all of these things that are in separate array elements and push them back together to make an actual string again, because a string is what we need to actually display on the screen. So we'll join all of the words in this array split text back again, and we'll use a space again to go in the middle of every single word, so we don't end up with one big long thing run together. And finally, once we know what string we're replacing back in there, we'll actually put it into the inner HTML of that paragraph. So basically we took it out, we did stuff to it, we put it back again. Let's save all that, reload the page and see what happened. Right, so all of those words have become emphasized, and if we just do a little inspect of this, we will actually see how they became emphasized. I think I need to find out, this is not giving me the view that I want. What I want is to see the actual structure of the page. I've got to open my browser out a little bit so I can see within that P tag, within that paragraph, every single word has individually got EM tags around it, which would be a very inefficient way of doing things if we actually wanted to emphasize every single word. But we actually don't. We just want to emphasize the big words. So inside this thing, to add an emphasis to a word, I now want to tell it only do that if it's a big word, which I'm going to very arbitrarily define as it's got a length bigger than 10. So if we change our add emphasis function like that and just run that again to see what's happening, that's a lot better. So now just some of them have been emphasized. You might see that some actual little words are emphasized. That's actually because, for instance, in mathematics of, what's in between them is actually, in the HTML, it's actually a new line character, not a space. So the JavaScript is not actually realizing that they're two separate words, and that's okay, I don't really care, not important. I'm going to write another one now, so I'm going to do this second function called replace me, so you'll see the reason for that ID tag in a second. So the replace, basically what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to go into the HTML of one of the paragraphs, and I'm going to mess with it. I'm going to put some different stuff in there. So I'm going to have some text that I'm going to replace the text in the paragraph with. So if you don't know why I'm choosing this particular text, go ask your granny, she'll know, or anyone else who was alive in the 1970s. So I'm going to start off by defining a bunch of different variables that I know that I'm going to need in here, and some of these, it'll become obvious in a minute why I need these particular variables. So remembering again, when I'm defining variables, I don't have to say this one's a string, this one's an int, whatever, because it's JavaScript. It's just, this is a variable. You can make it anything you like, which can be quite convenient when you're working away. It can be a little bit dangerous also if you assume that one sort of thing is in your variable and that it turns out it's not. But we're just doing some simple messing around here, so it should be okay. So here, in order to start replacing things in the text with something else, I'm going to have a variable that actually is the text, the original text, which is this variable passage. I've got a variable that's a replacement text, which is this variable shining, and I need a couple of variables to actually be the length of the two different texts, and you'll see why I need those in a moment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go through this text and I'm going to replace text in the passage with text from the replacement text, one character at a time. And if you think this sounds an incredibly inefficient way to replace text, you're completely right. It is extremely inefficient, but there is a good reason for this, and you'll find that out in about 5 minutes' time. So here I go. I have this variable pos, which is going to keep track of the position that I'm in both the strings at the same time, in both the original string and the replacement string. And I'm going to define this replacement character, which is the character in the replacement string at the position that I'm currently at. And what we'll do is for every single character, we will pop that replacement character in the correct place in the original string, which means that I'm going to use a string function called substring. I'm going to get all of the text from the original text up to the point that I'm at, up to pos. Then I'll put the replacement character in. Then I'll get the rest of the original text from where I am to the end of the paragraph. And that will be my new text. And you'll see this working in a minute. I will just continue to actually write this initial function. So the nice thing about substring is that you can just say take the substring from where I am right to the end. You don't actually have to worry about what the length of the text is for that second one. So the first substring is taking everything right from the start, which has index 0, not 1, because that's what JavaScript is like. And I'm just checking when this is going to happen. So on mouse over is my trigger, when the mouse goes over the paragraph. So before we get into this, I do just want to show some debugging stuff, and some slightly better debugging stuff than just popping up an alert box, because that's pretty crude and not a great way to do debugging. So in here, I have all of these different paragraphs with not only IDs on them, but now some of them with event listeners, like for instance a load event listener on the body and a mouse over event listener on this paragraph. So event listener means that it's checking all the time to see if a condition has been fulfilled. In this case, the mouse is over the paragraph. And when the condition is fulfilled, then it runs the function. And what I will also do in here, I'm just looking for, yes, debugging. So if I go into sources, I'm actually going to take this away so I can just show you putting it in. It says do Control P, and then you'll see all the files that are available there where your HTML is, and I've chosen this one, haunt.js, which is where my JavaScript is, and I'm putting a breakpoint, that little blue tag there, so that when it starts to run, which it's just done, it says paused in debugger up the top. So the breakpoint stopped everything so that we can actually look and see what's going on while it's going on. So I did some stepping over 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of the function, and I can have a look at various different variables. Let's have a look at this passage variable. So that's got all of the actual text in the paragraph. That's good, that's what we're going to be messing with. Let's keep stepping over it so we can see the function at work. So we can see that our position at the start is 0, and then as I step through, the position is going to keep increasing, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you look at the paragraph itself, you can see that it's being replaced letter by letter. ALL space, WRK space, and if I just tell it to run right to the end, there we have replaced the original text with the replacement text. And I've just moused over it again for no particular reason and run it again. No matter how many times I run it, it'll just replace the text right at the start of the paragraph. So that's not yet what we want, because we don't want to replace just the very first line of the passage. We want to cycle back to the start of the replacement text and keep going. So what I'm doing now is I'm saying keep going to the end of the passage, not the end of the replacement text. And so that we don't go off the end of the replacement text, we look for our replacement character using this function modulo, which is the percent sign, which means take the remainder when you divide pos by shining length. So here we go. I've just done that, and it, bang, all of a sudden it replaced everything with this replacement text repeated over and over again to the end of the paragraph. That's good. That's kind of what I want. It's not completely what I want, because it's happening too quickly. We want to slow it down. The whole reason why I'm doing this character by character is I want to see it happening. So I'm going to use this function setInterval. SetInterval takes a function and a number. So I'm going to turn this little while loop into an actual function. So instead of while pos is less than passage length, get rid of that and put a function declaration in instead. So setInterval is going to operate with this function, which has no name. It's just, this is a function, run it. And the second parameter there is a number in milliseconds. This is the delay in between running the function once and running it the next time. It's going to keep running that function with that 100 millisecond delay over and over again. So here we go, it's paused in the debugger again because I had that breakpoint in. And here we go, now we can see it happening because there's 100 milliseconds, 0.1 of a second, in between every time we run the function. And that is the effect that I wanted in the first place. That it's just ghostly fingers typing away, replacing all of your text with all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. There is still a problem with it. The problem, which I will explain while I keep writing, is that there's no ending condition yet. There's no way to stop this. At the moment, it will keep going, and when it comes to the end of the passage, it will keep going until the sun cools, or until your computer breaks down, which is probably more likely to happen first. So I'm going to run this function in the middle called clear interval. So when the condition is fulfilled, when we go off the end of the passage length, we will run this function called clear interval, which takes a name of an interval. That is why I gave the interval a name of int_setter up the top here. And basically, let's just see, so here it goes, it is in fact running off the end of it, because that's my original function with no way to stop. So, having done that, I will now save this with the actual way to stop, and I will reload that, and then we can see it going. In fact, what I probably should do first is I'll just go to this actual paragraph that I'm working on, and I'll get rid of a whole bunch of that text, because when I've done that, we can actually run this. I need to run it. Yes. We'll reload that so that it just all happens more quickly. We don't have to wait for quite such a long time for it to go off the end of the passage. So here we go. The function is running, and we will let it run until the end of the passage, and at that point we will see if it stops correctly or not. My money is on yes, it will correctly stop. 3, 2, 1. There we go, it stopped. On the other hand, it kind of stopped for the wrong reason. Right down the bottom here where it says uncaught reference int setter is not defined. That wasn't actually what I intended to happen. So basically it stopped because there was an error and it doesn't know what to do, not because it's correctly stopping because I told it. And this is the problem. The problem is that it is case sensitive, and one of my times when I referenced int setter, it had a capital letter, and the other time it did not. And I totally did that on purpose just to show you how JavaScript is case sensitive. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Right, having done that, let's go for our very last effect, which is I'm going to take off the poltergeist on the first paragraph and the eyes, etc. I'm going to take everything off because I don't want all of the effects to always be on the same paragraphs. That would be a bit boring. What I really want to do is to randomly put them on different paragraphs every time you load the page. That will be a bit more interesting. So I'm actually going to cut and paste from where I already wrote this. Here's what I prepared earlier. And I'll run through exactly what I've done. So this first variable here is an array, get elements by tag name, get an array of all of the elements that are paragraph elements. And then after that, I've got this randomized IDs, which is just a set of IDs, a list of IDs that I'm going to run through, putting them on one by one. Got 2 iCanvases there, which you shouldn't really do because you should only have one thing of each ID, but oh well, it's not actually going to stop me. And I am going to randomly go through. I need this little function random int, which doesn't actually exist until I write it. So let's do that here. There is a built-in math function which returns a random number between 0 and 1. That's not actually what I want. What I'm going to want is a random number between 0 and the number of paragraphs that I have. So if I just write this little function to multiply my random number by whatever, and then do floor, which is the integer which is underneath whatever decimal I've got. So the random int will give me a random integer between 0 and less than n. And then each time it goes through, it'll find a random paragraph and put one of those IDs on it. And at the end, where I've got this add event listener, so the event listeners is like on mouse over, on load, whatever. What this add event listener does is to add that JavaScript function as the thing that is done when mouse over happens to that element. So that's a lot of complicated explanation, but let's actually see it running. So obviously I'm going to have to tell my HTML page that setup paras is now the function that I'm going to load up. I'm going to start running when the page is loaded. So let's reload this page. In fact, maybe I might just see if I can look at the JavaScript file as I have now saved it. It looks like I'm going to have to reload the page first. That's showing the last save of the file. Now it's showing setup paras, which is what I want. So when I go up and down, I see that the iCanvas has been put on. That's nice, and there's the poltergeist has obviously thrown that paragraph away. Looking for the paragraph that has the shining ID on it, maybe what I should do is I will go in here. So there's the paragraph that's got the shining ID on it. If I look and see what paragraph that is, it's the one that starts off with the scheme. So I'll just come back up here and find which paragraph that is, which is this one, and when I mouse over it, there it goes, which is exactly what I want. So that's all good. Can't see my blood-soaked letters anywhere, but they might not be here anyway because you're not guaranteed to get all of the IDs. If the same number is randomly chosen twice, then the second, here we go. So it's working right this time. the blood-soaked letters went on. We've got a poltergeist in a different place, a couple of cat eyes. That is all very much what I wanted. Well, having done that, what else can we do? I feel that what I really want to do is I actually want to not just set up these paragraphs with their IDs at the start, but actually, after a certain amount of time, maybe take the IDs off and put them on different paragraphs. That will make it even more interesting. So I can use this set interval function the same as I did before in the replace the letters one by one function. Only this time, obviously, my interval won't be quite so short. If I have an interval of, say, 10,000 milliseconds, which is 10 seconds, then I can put all of these different effects on different paragraphs, then wait 10 seconds and then put the effects on a different paragraph, which would be kind of cool. So I think I'll go through and do that with the 10,000 milliseconds. Let me reload that and see what happens. Let's look at the whole thing. Don't see anything yet, so it might actually be waiting 10 seconds before it runs it the first time, but there go my two cat eyes, which is nice. Haven't yet found any of my other effects, but they're probably there somewhere. Oh, there go the blood-soaked letters, so that's good. Now let's see if we can see them change. What I'm actually seeing is I've got 3 cat eyes, so it seems to be putting more cat eyes on without necessarily having taken them off, which is probably not exactly what I want. I think I do see what's happened though. The problem that I've given myself here is that it puts on the IDs if the ID is currently blank, but obviously the second time round you go through, the ID is not blank. So what we need to go through is every time it runs, we need to actually blank out the IDs before going and randomly putting them on again. So I'll just do that. So now just counting from 0 to less than the number of paragraphs should make those IDs. Okay, that's got a bug, which is that I said int I when I should have said var I, because this is JavaScript, not Java, and our variables don't have types. At least it decides on the fly what types they are. So yes, for variable I is less than the number of paragraphs. I'm also going to go through down here because I realise I've got another slight problem. I am adding the event listeners each time, but I'm not actually checking if we had an element with that particular ID. Like I said before, we're not guaranteed that all of the IDs will end up used. So let me put those little if clauses in here to protect that declaration. So basically, if the element with ID shining or random emphasis actually exists, then go put your event listener on, and don't if it doesn't exist at all, which is sensible. Alright, and last of all, I should not say double equals there because that means test if it's equal. I should say single equals because that means set it to blank string. So let's just reload this again and see what happens. Nothing so far. Wait for a few seconds. Checking to see if mousing over any of these is going to do anything. There go the cat eyes on one of the paragraphs. And there go the blood-soaked letters on another paragraph. Poltergeist seems to have thrown away a paragraph, which is nice. And if we keep looking, we should... Oh, there goes another set of cat eyes, so that's good. And we didn't see the cat eyes going off. Obviously, the poltergeist's working somewhere else. I've just shrunk the letters here in order to see if I can see lots of paragraphs at the same time. So basically, the effects are going, the cat eyes are going off, the text replacement is happening, poltergeist's throwing them away randomly from different places, and that is basically all the things that I was going to do. So, thank you for watching. We've done all the things I wanted to do, but the files are going to be available on this webpage. You could certainly choose to do more stuff. I was thinking about a dripping blood animated GIF, which I didn't really get round to. Maybe a jump scare somewhere, except not at 120 decibels because that would be obnoxious. Maybe change these emphasised words so they're just not on one paragraph but on all through the text on different paragraphs, or pretty much whatever you like. So, happy web page making.